for a month, so we're just getting started. Why do you live in a society? Hey guys, we're here. We're waiting for TikTokers to trickle in. Anybody there? I think you should download Twitch. I think it's really fun. I think, especially with TikTok's getting so bad about censorship. I'm sure you guys have noticed that. TikTok's getting really, even worse with censorship than usual. So yeah. And Twitch, they actually want to encourage left-wing politics because they've seen it be profitable for them, capitalism, right, with Hasan. So they're like, no, that's fine. Come over here and do your left-wing politics, whatever. Kind of, dare I say, they will sell us the rope we used to hang them. I'm just saying. No. So, how many people are in the Twitch chat right now? Anybody? Or in the Twitch stream right now, rather, I can't see. Come on over. 51. Okay, we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait a little bit until we get some more people. Simmer Jamie, hi. Everybody's showing up. Mother Dyer, oh my God, I haven't seen you in a few days. Miki's new. Hi. Yeah, come over. We're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about Iran. We're gonna talk about Iran. Come on, get over it. Get in there. Hydrating. Oh, I'm gonna go get water actually really fast while people trickle in. So hold on. Everybody say hi. Hold on. I'll put up the fork screensaver. Yeah, so I'm getting water, so that's why you guys are still with me, but I am encouraging you to jump over to Twitch. We're going to have probably a day on. We just did 3 days in a row about Venezuela, about the election, about history, about what's on there, about diaspora, why it's so weird, etc. Would you voted for Kamala? No, I did not vote for Kamala. I voted for Claudia De La Cruz. And I had my life absolutely ruined for it. So all the people you see making up weird lies about me on the internet, it's because I voted for Kamala. That's it. Wasn't that crazy? And the Democrats are psychos. Okay, we're back. All right. You guys over there? All right, I'm jumping off here. See you on Twitch. Okay, hi. Hi, everybody. I'm talking to you now. Hi. I'm here. 144. Okay, that's pretty good. We'll answer a few light questions before we get into our agenda for the day. I feel like our agenda for the day is going to be Iran. Are you guys okay with that? If anybody has any objections to Iran, please speak now. I think I have 3 of these hydrates. Okay. What's the best way to support people locally from ICE? So, I actually saw a video that I reposted of people at Target watching 2 people get abducted by ICE. And one of the people recording, you can tell when this happens, people are surprised, right? They don't really know what to do. So I'm going to take these off while I talk to you guys because they hurt my head. And then when I start reading, I'll put them on. So you could see somebody at the last minute realized they should ask these people their names. And they were like, what's your name? What's your name? And they got the full name for the first guy. And the second guy just said his first name. So that's actually a good thing to do, is to get the names of the people being detained and put them out there, because it can be really, really hard to track people down after they enter ICE custody. So that kind of a thing is useful. They track them with this thing called an A number, and you have to know your A number and tell somebody your A number before your family can track you down with it. So it can be very, very complicated trying to find people. So I think one of the easiest things you can do is try to get information from the people being detained about them. And if you don't have a resource to try to find their family or anything like that to get in touch with them, whatever, I think putting it on the internet is probably not a bad idea, because some people do literally lose their family members. They can't find their family members. So I think that is good. There have been some cases of people successfully unarresting people from ICE. I don't know. It's obviously that can be very, very dangerous. ICE is shooting people in the face. So that's got to be a you decision if that's something you want to try to unarrest somebody or not. That's personal, right? So, that kind of stuff. I would say that some of the things that I think are more effective is if you work at a restaurant or a business or something like that, turning them away, shun these people socially. I think that is a pretty easy thing you can do, right? It's pretty hard. The truth is, though, look, I'm going to tell you guys the truth. The truth about resistance under capitalism is that it will never be able to rid you of these problems. Resistance under capitalism is futile, right? What is resistance under capitalism? Within the framework of the system, right? It's Call your representatives. What the fuck is that going to do? Your representatives are going to laugh at you and leave the phone off the hook, which they literally did in California. One time people got really mad about something in California. I can't remember what it was at this point. And our representatives bragged about just leaving the phones off the hook for a week and made fun of everybody trying to call. So yeah, court cases will not free you. So the reality is that your options as they're presented in the system, very, very limited. Very, very limited. Which is why Marxist-Leninists believe that revolution is inevitable. Revolution is inevitable in a state of capitalism because how much of these contradictions can you take? Like, the average person will reach a point where they can't survive in these conditions. So, you know, that's one of the complaints we were talking about yesterday with the Democratic Party. It's like they're bringing words to a gunfight, right? And that's not going to help you. Nothing like that is going to help. And I think that Democrats obviously are feckless because they don't want to go to civil war because that's bad for profits. And they'll ultimately just let Republicans do whatever they want. But the thing to remember is that Democrats are doing whatever the fuck they want too. They're also doing violent things. They also want to build the most lethal military in the world. They also are staging coups in other countries. They also are contributing to the militarization of domestic police forces and law enforcement forces that terrorize communities. Because it benefits them too. Because that's what's necessary to uphold and maintain capitalism. So I'm going to say the most important thing you can do is stop treating individual symptoms and start going after the root problem. The root problem is capitalism. And I would say the most important thing you can do is join a socialist org near you today. That's what I think you should do. And I'm a Marxist-Leninist, so I'm going to tell you to join a Marxist-Leninist org. The two biggest national Marxist-Leninist orgs are PSL or FRSO. I think those are both good options. But also there might be local ones near you. And I think the closer you are to one org, the better it is, the more important it is. And I would say, though, that if you don't have a Marxist-Leninist org near you, I'm an org person. I think it's still good to join even a Trotskyist org, even though I'm not a Trotskyist and I don't agree with them. If you only have DSA, I don't love DSA, but it's something. And I think we really need to start thinking about ourselves as organized and working together in groups. So I think that's really the most important thing you can do. And work to build socialist consciousness and understand the only way out of this is socialism. It is. That's it. Capitalism cannot reform. This cannot be reformed. And obviously one of the things you could do too, if you were an American voter and you want temporary relief, is leverage your vote. Say you're not voting for a Democrat unless they vow to abolish ICE. Say you won't vote for a Democrat unless they vow to give you free healthcare. Have a spine. Grow a spine. Stand the fuck up to these people, right? Because all they have is, we're not going to be as bad as Trump. Aren't you terrified of Trump? Aren't you terrified of Trump? What they're relying on is you not knowing they do just as bad as shit as Trump does. They just do it quietly, so you don't even know what's happening. So you don't get educated about bad shit that Democrats do too. And then grow a spine. Stand up to them. Say no. Right? So I think that's important. Yeah. So I would say Freedom Road Socialist Organization and Party for Socialism and Liberation are the two biggest Marxist-Leninist orgs in the country. Oh, I don't know where the balloons came from. I'm so sorry. I don't know why that happened. Yeah. But, yeah, that's what I think you should do. And if you don't like those orgs, that's totally fine. Look for a Marxist-Leninist org near you. And if there's no Marxist-Leninist org near you that you like, start one. That's fine. I don't care which one it is. I don't care which one you choose. Choose one, get going. Hit the ground running. Let's go. And I will say that I'm in LA, so there's a lot of stuff here. Okay, we got a highlight message from Game Boy's Game Boy. You asked yesterday, how did Hitler rise to power? Oh, that's right. The context was two Democratic Party loyalists on social media blaming the left for Trump getting elected because they didn't vote for Kamala, saying Hitler gained power the same way. But what really happened? Oh, okay. That's right. I totally forgot we were going to look that up. I'm going to kind of look this up in the background here. I'm going to pull up some resources for today, and that'll be one of the ones I did. So, if you like, WWP is not Trotskyist, right? I know PSL broke off from WWP. It's like Workers' World Party or whatever, right? Hydrate, I will. I would choose a trot over a Demso. I would go Marxist-Leninist, and if you don't have that, go with the trots. That's fine. They're going to be real weird about China. They're going to be real weird about the USSR, about China. Just ignore that. Just okay. They're wrong. They're wrong about other countries. So whatever. They're right about their assessments of capitalism, okay, and they're fighting for Marxism, and that's fine. They have an okay understanding of Marxism. That's fine. It's not ideal. And then I would say, like democratic socialists, DSA types, or anarchists, like whatever, just that's fine, just something. That's the order I would go in. Yeah, PSL broke off from Workers' World Party. Yeah. Oh, somebody, Jellyfish, first time chat. You were taught both parties in the United States are bad. Yeah, they are. But Americans are brainwashed. They don't know that. Republicans here, which is our conservatives, our super conservatives, they're more likely to tell you all politicians are bad and both parties are bad. The people who support the more progressive party we have here, which is just a center-right party that masquerades as being very progressive, they will tell you no. Up and down, they'll be like, we're not a right-wing party. We are so progressive. We are the most progressive thing on the planet. And to the extent that they will actually invent conspiracy theories, oh, sorry, I'm still researching, saying that socialists are secretly conservative and stuff like that. They're literally trying to like double speak their way around it. Okay, so I'm gonna look up some stuff first to talk about Iran and about Hitler's rise to power. Talk amongst yourselves. Give me a few minutes. Listen to the soft sound of the clicking of the keyboard. I've got some text pulled up. I'm just doing a little pre-reading to make sure it's where we want to go. So, just a few more minutes, guys. I accidentally ended up on a trot rag reading It's Wild. You're like, ooh. Still searching. Sorry, 1 second. Ugh, everything's written by Trotskyists. Oh, God. Hold on. Are we gonna have to read Trotsky? Oh, God. We just read Trotsky. It's gonna be so weird about Stalin. We're almost there. Thanks for holding on while we do this, guys. Sorry. Give me a few minutes here. The Hitler thing's a little trickier to track down than you might think. We'll read a little Trotsky on it. We'll keep going with Trotsky a little bit. Okay. All right, I've got some things pulled up. So we have options. Do you guys want to start with Iran and current events, or do you want to start with the Hitler, Nazi Germany, communist, socialist things? Socialist Workers Party in the U.S., not the UK one. You know, I have heard of them. Yeah, they expressed a strong support for Israel Zionism. Yeah, very weird. There's a lot of weirdos out there. That's why I think Marxist-Leninism is like the way. It's the people who aren't weird. It's the people who are like ethically on the right side of history and very practical and pragmatic and like have actual concrete goals of what we want to achieve. We can look at other countries and be like, they have done these things correct. We have a blueprint here. We want to do this. Iran. I think Iran's winning. Okay, so let's do Iran. Let's start with Iran. All right, so here we go. We're going to start, literally I pulled up for later for Hitler, the Social Democratic Party on Britannica. That's how starved for resources we were on that. So we'll look at that later. So we're going to start though with Iran. And to get us started, I was just going to pull up current events, current news, what's going on in Iran according to the news. So 34 minutes ago, we have something from the BBC that says that there are huge protests going on in Iran. Do you guys want to watch the video or should we read? This is a really extraordinary,
dramatic and very unpredictable moment for Iran. In towns and cities right across...
Should we watch the video together? All right, let's see what this lady's saying.
This is a really extraordinary, dramatic and very unpredictable moment for Iran. In towns and cities right across the country, a sea of protesters from all walks of life are basically taken over the streets. They want to show their anger at the religious leaders who've ruled them so repressively for almost half a century. There have been internet blackouts, so we don't have a full picture of what's going on. And they come after nearly 2 weeks of unrest that began with anger over the economy and huge price rises, and then quickly became really about everything that so many Iranians hate about the regime and its restrictions on political and social freedoms, like, for example, its imposition of the hijab on women. So what happens next, we really don't know. Many say that the regime is now at a dead end with no solutions against the anger of the people. Donald Trump's warned that Iran will be hit very, very hard if protesters are killed, but dozens of people are already dead. The country's supreme leader, who's 86 years old, has now claimed that the people on the streets are rioters trying to please President Trump. So these are really critical times in Iran, and why it matters is that the country is a key player in the politics and security of the entire Middle East.
Okay, so that's how the BBC is reporting on what's going on. So we're going to talk about this. There's a lot of stuff in there that really made me roll my eyes. Now, what we do here, if you're new here, we pull up like the news and we look at what's going on in the news and then we talk about it from a Marxist perspective. So I keep getting locked out of different news orgs because I keep hitting paywalls. So we bounce around from mainstream news org to mainstream news org to look at what they're reporting. And then we talk about it. So BBC is saying, obviously, that, treasure train incoming. What's a treasure train? There's something new every time. It's wild. Okay. No, that's okay if you're new. Yeah. This is kind of our format. I should at the beginning start to like go over how it goes so everybody knows what to expect. So BBC is hitting us with a lot of propaganda and this right out of the gate. Now, the first thing I want to say is that as a Marxist-Leninist, right, I know Iran does not have a Marxist-Leninist government. I know that, just like I know Russia, modern day Russia does not have a Marxist-Leninist government. So when we talk about places like Iran or Russia, we say that we understand they don't have our ideal internal government structures, but we also recognize that the internal government structures they have today are a direct response to American aggression where they live, right? Where they are. And not just us, Western in general, but especially us. So their current government is a reaction to things we have done to them. And additionally, that they provide a necessary counterbalance on the global stage when it comes to foreign affairs. So when we talk about Venezuela, for example, I said this on my TikTok live. The reason why Donald Trump's attempt at a coup in 2019 was not successful in Venezuela is literally because Russia showed up and parked 2 aircrafts and was like, are you sure? And that's what saved Venezuela. So you don't have to love Russia's internal political structure and be like, that's my communist utopia. It's not. To recognize that what Russia is doing to provide a counterbalance to American imperialism on the world stage is helpful and beneficial, right? Same thing with Iran. Iran similarly provides a very necessary counterbalance to American imperialism throughout the Middle East. We know their internal government is not our ideal, but we also know that we as Americans certainly cannot critique Iran's internal government. We have no right to critique that because it is there because of us. So some of the things that really stood out to me in this video that I want you to keep in mind as we take a step forward and really learn about the history, what happened in Iran and what got us to this point is, in particular, talking about how women are protesting being forced to wear the hijab, okay? I want you to keep that in mind because that we're going to see there was a period in time where women in Iran were actually forced to dress in Western clothing to appease the United States. They were forced not to wear their traditional clothing. So that is a reaction to that, right? The reason why they're wearing traditional clothing today is because we literally backed, basically, if you want to use the term dictator, a dictator there, right? We backed a king, a Shah, who then forced the population of Iran to dress in Western clothes to please the United States, to signify to the United States that Iran was interested in playing ball with the United States. Like, we're talking women forced to wear mini skirts and stuff in the 1960s and 70s. Like, this is, you know, to me, it feels very sexual assault vibes. Like, if you were a woman who wants to wear a hijab and cover yourself and is part of your spirituality and part of your religion, the idea that your government can force you to wear skimpier clothing is absolutely horrifying to me. That is absolutely horrifying to me. And that is what was happening. The same way back in the early 2000s, if some of you are old enough, you might remember France was literally going around to women on the beach who were wearing full one-piece cover-ups and forcing them to like remove their hijabs at gunpoint and stuff like that. And they did it under the guise of liberating women, but that's not liberating women, very clearly, right? So, yeah. There are some photos of women wearing American clothes. I'm sure we'll find them. Iran before the Ayatollah. Sorry, I misspelled Ayatollah. These are the kind of styles, right? And people will always show you this and be like, look at how progressive and liberated Iran was. That's the actual Ayatollah happening. But you know, this is what people will show you and be like, this is progress because I can see women's legs. And it's like, look, I love to wear skimpy clothes in the summertime. Like, my ex used to joke, like, Madeline's ass is out on a Tuesday. Like, I love a skimpy clothes. Like, I would probably walk around naked if it was more socially acceptable. I do not care. I get it. But I also recognize that you do not force women to expose themselves in public like this and make them wear Western clothes that are more form-fitting, that are more revealing against their will. Especially not women who come from a cultural or a custom or religious practice in which that is deeply disturbing to them, right? So we're going to talk about that. So that's some of the how propaganda works, the subtle propaganda. You hear that and you're like, oh my God, they're making them cover themselves. You missed the whole history though. That's a reaction to a time when we forced them to expose themselves. So this is kind of what's going on here. Yeah, freedom is when we can check out the women. Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely kooky. So I pulled up this BBC article as a supplement to see what they would say about Iranian women before and after the Islamic Revolution. And what they're saying is the Islamic Revolution of 1979 brought seismic changes to Iran, not least for women. One area that had come under scrutiny is the way women dress and wear their hair. The old Shah in the 1930s banned the veil and ordered police to forcibly remove headscarves. But in the early 1980s, the new Islamic authorities imposed a mandatory dress code that required all women to wear the hijab. 1980s, okay. So, what are we looking at here? The bouncing back and forth. Before the revolution, studying at Tehran University. And this is all presented as like, look how free they were, right? Look at how free they were. They're wearing Western clothes. They're wearing Western clothes. That's all that's happening. They are dressed like Americans. And it's very on purpose that they are dressed like Americans. So women are rallying against the hijab in 1979. Soon after taking power, Iran's new supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, decreed that all women had to wear the veil, regardless of religion or nationality. Okay, on March 8th, International Women's Day, thousands of women from all walks of life turned out to protest against the law. I'm not going to pretend like all women wanted to wear a hijab. Not all women did, but some did, right? So, Protests outside the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, 1979. Revolutionary students took dozens of U.S. Embassy staff hostage while thousands of anti-U.S. demonstrators surrounded the compound. At this time, it was normal to see different types of people allied in their absolute hatred of the United States and Iran. Why? We're going to table that. We'll get into that. They kind of just don't really talk about it, right? Like, why? Okay. The Americans and the British have a long history in Iran of attempting both influence and takeover of oil in Iran. So this deep-rooted mistrust of the U.S. and the UK goes back a long way. They don't really talk about what this is. We literally overthrew their government and imposed dictatorial rule over them leading up to this. They don't mention that. Very, very convenient, right? They're just like, well, they wanted our oil. It's like, I'm sorry, we overthrew their government and installed the Shah as being in charge of their government, and he led a very, very repressive reign of terror on behalf of the United States. So, this is kind of how these stories are told. Wedding dress shopping, and then, walking in Tehran in 2005. Look at the oppression, right? Not all women in Iran opt to wear the black, a cloak that covers their body from head to toe and only leaves their face exposed. Many just wear loosely fitted headscarves and coats. The real question is, how far back do you push your scarf? Women have their own small acts of resistance and often try as far as possible to push their scarves back. Caspian Sea Beach 2005. Here we go. Iranian women are forbidden from bathing in public wearing swimsuits. Men and women aren't supposed to swim together. Blah, 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 blah. Pro-hijab rally in Tehran 2006. More than 25 years after the revolution, women backing the hardliners in the establishment staged their own rallies to protest against what they saw as authorities' failure to enforce the compulsory hijab law. Here, the women were all dressed in black chadors, with the exception of a little girl. So, what is actually able to be seen here is that women in Iran are split, just like women anywhere, right? Some people want to wear one thing, some people want to wear other things. Some women are more religious, some women are less religious, and that's totally fine. But I think to have a conversation as a Westerner about women being forced to wear hijabs in Iran without acknowledging the reason why, which we're going to get into, is deeply irresponsible. And it's propaganda. It's a reason. It's to paint Iran as being irrational, reactionary, religious extremist zealots who want to oppress and control their people, not as a country trying to fight off the West, constantly trying to overthrow it and destabilize it. So that's what we're going to get into. Now, I did find on CFR, Council for Foreign Relations, a timeline of our interventions in Iran. And this is not necessarily a left-wing resource that we're looking at here. It's a pretty center-right resource, I will say, but I have found it reliable to get the facts of the matter without a lot of editorializing on some issues of foreign affairs. So we're going to look at them, and I'm going to point out to you whenever I think something's a little off or propagandized. Now, see, and this is what I mean. They come right out and say it. This situation between the United States and Iran started on August 19th, 1953, when the CIA created a coup. So they'll come out and say it. The CIA did a coup in Iran. They say assists, we did a coup in Iran. So basically what had happened is Iran has rich oil reserves. And they had elected a socialist, Mossadegh, to the position of, I believe, prime minister. And he had wanted to nationalize the oil in Iran to try to keep some of the wealth from their oil reserves safe at home. Does that ring any bells, right? That's what Venezuela did that pissed us off so much, right? How dare Chavez nationalize their oil? And now Donald Trump's on TV saying that's our oil. They stole it from us by nationalizing it and not letting us steal it. So that's what was going on in Iran, very, very obviously. They nationalized the oil, and the United States was not so fast, not on our fucking watch, right? So U.S. and British intelligence, the CIA worked with MI6 to overthrow Iran's prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. And Mossadegh was democratically elected by the will of the people. And Mossadegh had nationalized the British-owned Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which led London to impose an oil embargo on Iran. The coup brought into power a Western-friendly monarchy headed by the Shah. We call him Reza. Shah Reza is what people call him. But it's Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Now, the way the political structure operates in Iran, there had always been the Shah, the king, right, whose family had a lineage going back of leading, and then the prime minister. So when they had introduced reforms to try to make it less of an overt monarchy, they introduced a parliament with the prime minister. So kind of like how England, when we think that they've got the king, but then they got the prime minister, that kind of a thing. So the Shah's role at the time was really limited. He was rich, right? He was like literally the king of Iran, right? But he didn't have as much political influence as the prime minister did. So basically the United States approached Shah Reza and was like, hey, do you want more political influence? Because we hate this fucking prime minister. So we can get him out of here and we can basically reconsolidate all the power in your hands. So you're in charge of Iran. Does this interest you? And Shah Reza was like, fuck yeah, let's go. Like, give me all the power. I want it. Fuck Mossadegh. So the United States works with MI6, stages a coup, takes control of Iran, ousts Mossadegh, and guess what? Now Shah Reza is in charge. But Shah Reza is a puppet for the United States government. He's like our little dog on a leash over there, right? He's doing what we're commanding. So he was really unpopular. The people didn't like him before the coup. They were like, the fucking king, hate him. They liked Mossadegh. They just elected him, right? They wanted to nationalize their oil. And they already did not love the United States. So for the United States to come in, stage a coup, oust their democratically elected leader they like, and say, guess what? Now you listen to Shah Reza, who you actually don't like that much. They hated it. The people of Iran fucking hated this. I think that the closest example of this would be like, I'm trying to think of somebody really unpopular in American politics. Like Fetterman. Like everybody hates Fetterman, right? Like Democrats hate Fetterman, Republicans hate Fetterman. It would be like North Korea coming into the United States, kidnapping Donald Trump, and then being like, John Fetterman's in charge of your country now. You'd be like, we don't even fucking like this guy. What? But with more power even, right? So maybe not the best analogy, but you know what I mean. Not a popular guy. Okay. Is chat feisty? Are they fighting? Are the girls fighting in the chat? The girls are fighting in the chat. Okay. All right. Everyone hates Fetterman. Wish to Crackerwood. Hi. Welcome. First time chat. Hi. Okay. So, all right. Now, 1954, Iran signs this oil agreement, right? The Shah basically is like, USA, Britain, France, take it. You can have the oil. That's fine. Remember, they nationalized the oil. He's like, no, but you get 40% of it. You get 40% of all of our oil for 25 years. Cool. Great. Love it. Excellent. Now, Atoms for Peace Program, 1957. The United States and Iran, now under that Shah Reza everybody hates, signed the Cooperation Concerning Civil Uses of Atoms Agreement, right, for some sort of nuclear peace program, blah, 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 blah. 1960, OPEC comes around. Now, OPEC is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So if you listen to us talk about Venezuela, or you listen to my podcast episodes about Venezuela, OPEC, right? So, but it was at the time not just Iran and Venezuela. It was Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela all together. So they basically were like, we're going to come together to flex our oil might, more or less. Uh-oh, Fork's awake. Fork break. Hold, please. I have to make sure Fork's being good. Oh, my partner might be home. Come on. Come on, really, Fork. Yeah, my partner's home. Okay, that's fine. That's allowed. They can deal with it. You just have to hear Fork yelling at my partner as my partner parks their car. My partner listens to a lot of techno, so something really funny is that Fork associates techno with my partner. So whenever anybody drives by blasting techno, Fork loses it like this because she's obsessed with my partner and thinks they're coming home. Okay, so OPEC basically is like, we're gonna flex some of our weight, come together, right? We're stronger together, organizing against the West in terms of what we can really make happen for our oil. Now, by the 1970s, their profit was skyrocketing, and they were actually starting to gain some leverage. So Iran became even more important to the United States, because the United States was like, okay, yeah, technically you guys are flexing your weight against us, but also the Shah of Iran's like our guy. So, like, do whatever you want. We still get our Iran. All right. So then Nixon goes to Iran, okay, asks the Shah for help, basically, protecting U.S. security interests in the Middle East. So basically what's happening is Iraq at the time is allied with the USSR. So the same way the United States really is into what Israel's doing, because they can provide a strategic military outpost in the region against our enemies. They were kind of hoping to do that with Iran, right? They're like, oh my God, look, there's all these commies and commie sympathizers over by you. Your location, really prime. Would you help us fight against communism in the Middle East? And Iran is like, of course. And in return, Nixon is like, okay, you can get any non-nuclear weapon system, basically, that you want. That's totally fine. Arm yourselves, la, la, la. So that's what's going on there. And then The whole time this is happening, though, the people of Iran are not happy, right? They're not pleased on this. They are very, very upset. They are noticing that the United States is basically running their country, and they're not stoked, right? They've been dealing with the old Shah before Reza had also forced women to wear more Western clothes. Under this Shah, they introduced laws of Westernization further that included how people were allowed to dress as well, that made those things even more extreme. And in 1979, this erupted. And the Iranian people were like, that's it. That's enough. We don't want our country run by the United States. And they marched to the streets and they staged a revolution. They overthrew the Shah. So they overthrew the Shah, and a lot of American media has come out of this. I don't know. This basically became what we know as the Iran hostage crisis, if you guys remember this. Basically, they took over the U.S. embassy, and there were some people in the embassy that were held hostage, and negotiations happened between the revolutionary forces of Iran attempting to expel the Americans and the U.S. government over the hostages. If you've ever seen the movie Argo, with Ben Affleck, I think that movie is about the Iranian hostage crisis. It's based on a real story that happened during that time of some Americans who managed to flee the embassy, were being held at a Canadian diplomat's house secretly, and had to be smuggled out of the country. So what's really important to note about this, though, is the anger of the Iranian people. And I think that's something really important. Hold on. So, the Iranian people, like, to stage this coup, you need to really think about everything that led up to this point. They were massively, massively upset. Remember, we got rid of their democratically elected prime minister. We forced Americanization on them. We forced Westernization on them. So they were reacting to us. They hated us. And part of what they hated was just Western culture in general. So now you can see in this picture, they're carrying up an image of Ayatollah Khamenei. So Ayatollah Khamenei is a religious leader in Iran. And under the U.S.-backed forces, he had actually left Iran because he was so unwelcome there, because he had so much popularity and he was such a deeply conservative Iranian figure associated with, the old guard, the old way of doing things before the U.S. took over. So one of the things that the people were upset about was him basically being expelled, as they viewed it, by the government of the United States. And they were like, where's our Ayatollah? It would be the equivalent of the Dalai Lama being forced to leave Tibet, or the Pope being forced to leave Italy. I don't know, something like that. So they actually, in part of this, were marching through the streets, and some of them were like, also, where's our fucking Ayatollah? Bring our Ayatollah back. So after their revolution was successful, and they successfully ousted Shah Reza from power, there was this kind of power vacuum moment where they're like, who is going to be in charge of Iran? And there were different kind of forces involved, obviously, and different ideas about how to proceed. Now, something important about Marxist-Leninism that I think a lot of people don't understand is that most Marxist-Leninists don't imagine themselves as revolutionaries, right? When we look at the situation in Iran, we had revolutionaries. These people were revolutionaries. They were running through the streets demanding that the American government leave. They wanted to get rid of them. They wanted a revolution. They were revolutionaries. But in the aftermath of the revolution, what happened? Who was supposed to take over and what was supposed to lead? Now, Marxist-Leninists believe that revolution is necessary to move from capitalism to socialism or communism, that revolution is inevitable, that it will happen under capitalism, that you cannot vote your way out of capitalism, therefore it is necessary that revolution will be the thing that ends it. But that does not mean that most Marxist-Leninists necessarily imagine themselves as revolutionaries, right? It might be anybody. It might be people who don't even have strong political ideologies, some of the ideologies we've seen come out of certain shooters of healthcare CEOs, for example, or, whatever. They don't have strong, singular political ideologies. They just know the current system is bad. And the thing about Marxist-Leninists, where they really come in, is with this idea of the vanguard party. They're like, so when you have the revolution and you win, what happens next? What new government gets built in its place? Because these sort of situations create power vacuums with power grabs. And if you don't have an organized representative of the masses there to say, this is the country we want. We want to build this fair, just system that cares for people, and we know how to do it, and we're ready to enact it. If you don't have that, there's this question of what comes next. So most Marxist-Leninists, what they really believe is there needs to be this vanguard party there to help figuring out what happens after the revolution. And hey, we're here and we have a plan. We know how to do this. We know how to run a government. We've studied how to run a government. Dictatorship of the fleas. Yes. So that they didn't have a Marxist-Leninist vanguard party in Iran ready to take over. They had a lot of people confused about what should come next. And what they realized is that they needed something unifying. They needed something unifying. And the Ayatollah was really popular. So they were like, in this time, the Ayatollah would be the best person probably to lead us, because everyone kind of liked the Ayatollah, you know? Everybody had pretty warm and fuzzy feelings about him. So they brought the Ayatollah in to lead Iran. Now, let's talk about this right here. Ayatollah Khomeini was a Shiite cleric who opposed the Shah's westernization of Iran. He'd been very vocally opposed to the Shah. And he returned after spending 14 years in exile outside of Iran. And it says he took power as supreme leader in December. I think that language is a little misleading. The people asked him. The people really wanted him. He was really popular. And he was like, we are going to have the most anti-USA country on the planet. Like, that is our goal. Our goal is to be so anti-USA. So what did he do? He got rid of all of the pro-West reforms. Now, a lot of the pro-West reforms involved secularization, which meant that the flip side of that was going to be theocratic. Now they have a religious country. It's theocratic. Things like dressing very Western. No, you can't do that anymore. They forced you to dress Western. Guess what? Now we're forcing you to dress very traditionally Iranian. All these sorts of things that came about. So Khomeini said that Iran was going to try to export its revolution, its anti-American revolution, to its neighbors as well. And in 1985, Hezbollah in Lebanon actually pledged allegiance to Khomeini. Sorry. Yes, here's the article. Sorry. So this is what we're looking at here. I'm going to zoom in. I don't know how well it works if okay. Here we go. So this is the section we're talking about here. This right here. So this is us talking about what kind of the Shah's plan is. Now, this leads to, of course, then immediately after, this is November 1979. Immediately after, they have the Iranian hostage crisis. They're like, what do we do with all these Americans we captured at the embassy? It's 52 Americans. And, a group of radical Iranian college students were the ones who did it. And they were saying that the United States needed to extradite the Shah. They really wanted the Shah to, stand trial for his crimes, basically, too. They were like, he needs to be held accountable. This comment, give nukes to his... Oh, it's microplastics, of course. Every time there's a funny and good comment, it's always microplastics. So, Washington severed ties with Iran and then started sanctioning their oil imports, and they froze all Iranian assets. Why? Because they had the audacity to expel us, right? But really, we claimed that it was because they took Americans hostage in the embassy. And it's like, well, I wonder why they did that. And yes, the president, a person running for office, used the Iran-Contra hostage crisis, because it started in November of an election year, to win leverage during the election year. Yes, that is correct. They were even like, let it drag on a little bit. It might help. Might help me win. So Americans are soulless ghouls. We can't act like we have any sort of moral high ground here, right? So after 444 days, the hostages got released. And the deal was signed just minutes after the inauguration of who? President Ronald Reagan. He's the one that did that in 1980. And his actual thing in 1980, he had emphasized President Jimmy Carter's failure to free the hostages, but they had found out that there would probably be an opportunity to free the hostages before this, and they just kind of let it ride. Because Reagan had secretly been negotiating with Iran before he was even president. So, worth noting, okay? Child of the Reach, channeling Freya the Kulak. I love that you know all the lore. Child of the Reach knows all my lore. So, then this brings us to 1980 to 1988. I'm hydrating myself. Okay. Now, Iraq invades its neighbor and growing rival, Iran, amid fears of a Shiite revolt against the Iraqi leader at the time, Saddam Hussein. The United States supports a secular Iraq, right, with economic aid, training, and dual-use technology until the war ends in 1988. Even after the CIA finds evidence that Iraqi forces used chemical weapons against the Iranians. I'm pretty sure that's a war crime. An estimated 1 million Iranians and between 250 to 500,000 Iraqis died in the conflict. Now remember, we later on would claim Saddam Hussein was the most evil bad man that ever evil bad man. But at this time, he's our friend. Why? Because we hate Iran. We fucking hate Iran. How dare they humiliate us on a global stage like they did, right, in 1979. They, them are the good pronouns. If people get my pronouns wrong in a way that does not seem like it's malicious or like it is trying to degrade women, I'm generally kind of cool with it, but they, them is what I use. 1983, Beirut gets bombed. And I talk about this in my podcast episode I did about this. It's kind of a messy situation, but basically this looks like a pretty small summary, so we'll just read it. 2 trucks loaded with explosives drove into some military barracks housing American and French military men, okay? And they were part of this multinational force in Lebanon. So the bombs basically went off in this area where people were sleeping. And the attack killed 241 U.S. military personnel, which happened to be the highest single-day death toll for the U.S. Armed Forces since the Tet Offensive during the Vietnam War. And a group of Islamic Jihad, Islamic Jihad, widely believed to be a front for Hezbollah, claimed responsibility for the attacks. The bombings then kind of encouraged the United States to be like, we need to get out of Lebanon. And it led to the State Department designating Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism in 1984. Now, I just want you to remember, Iran gets designated as a state sponsor of terror. But really what had happened is that they were invaded by Iraq. That's what started all of this. Iraq invaded them, right? The United States was like, oh my God, Iraq, we hate Iran too. We'll help you. Bang, bang, shoot them all dead. We and Iraq together killed a million Iranians. And then they kill 241 Americans, and all of a sudden they're terrorists. We're not terrorists. They're terrorists. So, okay. So we've got this real fucking personal anti-Madeline jihad. You know what? That's fine. I'll accept it at this point. I'm real tired, so why not? Yeah, so this is what's going on. So now all of a sudden we're like, oh, how could they do this to us? They're terrorists. And it's like, my brother in Christ, like what have we been doing there since we removed Mossadegh from power and decided Iran should just belong to us? Come on. So 1985, Iran-Contra affair comes about. Everybody should remember this, right? We're talking about Latin America. This is kind of relevant. This involves my podcast co-host David Roberts, his favorite character in all of American political history, Oliver North. So there's an arms embargo, basically, that Congress has passed against giving Iran weapons. John Reach, what would you do if I formed a cult of personality around you, did in 1984 Oceania, but isolationist in your big brother? I'd probably get bored and leave. I'd be like, that was fun. Okay, I'm bored now. Bye. Have fun. So Reagan administration officials, including Oliver North, are like, I know we're not legally able to sell weapons to Iran, but it could be cool to sell some weapons to Iran. So they actually start selling weapons to Iran to secure the release of 7 Americans held hostage by Hezbollah in Lebanon. So we've got this weird triangle of events happening here. And the official use of the money from the illegal arms deal then goes to fund anti-socialist, anti-communist, far-right, basically, like, I don't know, just violent monsters, right, in Nicaragua that we have hired, the CIA has hired, called the Contras. They're rebel groups there, but the CIA is like, hey, psychopaths with guns, do you hate communism? So do we. What if we pay you to be psychopaths with bigger guns? And Contras are like, bet. And then we're like, cool, here's the money that we got by illegally selling guns to to Iran. So this is what comes to be known as the Iran-Contra scandal. We've got Iran, we've got the Nicaraguan Contras that are anti-communist, right? And then the CIA and Oliver North are just like, like, what did we do? Of course. So, yeah, the CIA loves to find some psychopaths with guns and fund them getting bigger guns. That's its favorite move. That's the not our guys move, as I call it, right? Like, we didn't do it. Those aren't our guys, but it, like, is our guys. We just paid them under the table. So Reagan then has to take responsibility for the scandal in 1987 on TV, and some people get convicted of like crimes in the American government, and then Hezbollah kills 2 of the hostages, but then slowly starts releasing the rest over time. Now, April 18th, 1988, Operation Praying Mantis. After an Iranian mine nearly sinks an American frigate, we'll do it Italian, frigate, in the Strait of Hormuz. That's what's going to happen. Anytime I can't pronounce a word in English, I'm just going to pronounce it in a bad Italian accent from now on. The U.S. Navy launches a retaliatory campaign called Operation Praying Mantis. So American forces destroy 2 Iranian oil platforms and sink a frigate. In July, the U.S. Navy shoots down an Iranian passenger jet after mistaking it for a fighter jet, killing all 290 people on board. I'm going to say this again. The U.S. Navy shot down a regular commercial aircraft from Iran. Just a flight. Like, if you went to go take a flight, you go to the airport, you're like, I'm flying from LA to Mexico City. The U.S. military shot it down and murdered nearly 300 people. Okay? All right. So, anti-Italian slurs on stream. Next conspiracy. Then, of course, Persian Gulf War. So the United States leads a coalition of 35 countries to expel Iraqi forces occupying Kuwait. They're not our friends anymore. We don't like Iraq anymore. Things have changed. Now we hate them. And we ousted the Iraqis in a matter of months. We're fickle. That's why Jeffrey Sachs always says, yeah, sure, it's dangerous being an enemy of the United States, but it's more dangerous being a friend of the United States. Yeah, we're not a very loyal friend. So this war leads to an intrusive UN inspection kind of to prevent Iraq from restarting its weapons of mass destruction program. Comprehensive sanctions and widespread corruption under the Oil for Food program created in the wake of the war devastate the Iraqi public for nearly a decade, but fail to dislodge Saddam Hussein. Iran declares itself neutral in the conflict, but U.S. officials suspect that it is trying to replace Iraq as the dominant power in the region. Whatever. They do hate the United States. I don't know. So then what comes about is more sanctions in the 90s. This is really when I started to gain consciousness. This would be the stuff on the news when I was a kid that I was like overhearing a lot, right? George H.W. Bush, sorry, not the younger one, the older one, Bill Clinton. In 1992, Congress passes the Iran-Iraq Arms Non-Proliferation Act, which sanctions military materials that could be used to develop advanced weaponry. We're really trying to stop basically these people from developing weapons. And the White House expanded these sanctions with a complete oil and trade embargo in 1995, which is major, a complete oil and trade embargo. And the 1996 Iran and Libya Sanctions Act imposes an embargo against non-American companies investing more than $20 million per year in Iran's oil and gas sectors. Non-American companies. So they're getting hit really, really hard with sanctions. Now, 1998 to 2000, they say mini détente. Look at this absolute ghoul. I remember this ghoul from my childhood. This is U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. Because sometimes we let a lady do the war crimes. Because we're very progressive. And I remember, because this is the only other Madeleine I had ever heard of growing up as a kid in the 90s. Now you meet other Madeleines. At the time, it was me and this chick holding it down. It was just the two of us. It was just me and Madeleine Albright. Very, very bad era to be a Madeleine. So, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright meets with Iran's deputy foreign minister at the 6+2 talks during a 1998 UN General Assembly. It is the highest level of contact between the United States and Iran since 1979, since they kicked us out of their country. Girl boss. Yeah. So in April of 2000, Madeleine Albright acknowledges that the United States did indeed, yes, overthrow Mossadegh. What are you gonna do? And called previous policy towards Iran short-sighted. Like, I'm sorry, maybe we shouldn't have overthrown your democratically elected prime minister. Oops, our bad. Oopsie. And we lift some sanctions against them. All right, we kind of normalize them. Yeah, who's the person saying they don't need sources in here? You always need sources. You always need sources, whoever said that. Now, 2001 comes about, December 5th, 2001. So we're a few months after 9/11. 9/11 is September 11th, 2001, right? And this changes everything. This changes our whole outlook and policies in the Middle East. This really makes George W. Bush ramped up on this idea that he could use this as a way to get rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, finally. We get a lot of, I said this in yesterday's episode talking about ICE, but we get a lot of doublespeak, and all these things are related. Do you notice how we're talking about 9/11? It causes ICE. It also becomes us saying Saddam Hussein is the biggest problem in the Middle East. It also leads to us invading the Middle East. All these issues end up getting related. So George W. Bush seems like he's just like, what can I use 9/11 to justify? Anything, I'll do it. And it really, 9/11 becomes carte blanche for the Bush administration to do absolutely anything they fucking want, apparently. It's wild to watch happen, and we all watched it happen. So after the 9/11 attacks, George W. Bush's administration establishes a back channel with Iran to help coordinate the defeat of the Taliban, a shared enemy that had provided safe haven to members of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. In the aftermath of the 2001 U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, the United States and Iran collaborated on something called the Bonn Agreement, which was state building and the repatriation of Afghan refugees. So it's kind of like the enemy of my enemy might be my friend, kind of a thing. Now, in January 29th, 2002, this was something so ingrained in our minds. This was a cultural moment, okay? And I want to say, you guys know how Donald Trump is an entertainer, right? I recently saw that people in China thought videos of Donald Trump were AI because they could not believe a president would actually act like that, because he's such a character, and I mean that in a derogatory way, like he's not a real human being. He's just ridiculous in how he acts. George W. Bush was like that accidentally. And I really need you guys who aren't old enough to remember this to understand. He was a character also, but like not on purpose. Like, this guy seemed checked out half the time. It felt like he didn't really know what was going on. He was kind of the banality of evil. A lot of people thought that he was really like more of a puppet for his father, who had previously been president. Not to brag, but I pissed on Margaret Thatcher's grave. That's a big brag. That's a big brag. So, yeah, get your shoes ready. We're talking about Bush. A reporter famously threw a shoe at George W. Bush's head. I mean, this guy was cuckoo. Watching him talk was wild. And most Americans said they voted for him because he seemed like the kind of guy you could get a beer with. This was the quote about George W. Bush. People did not see him as competent. They did not see him as crafty or as an evil mastermind. He was just kind of a dingbat, like a ditz, but like in an evil way, right? Ditz is for evil. And that's why the videos you'll see of him, he's at a kindergarten doing like a reading of a children's book to children for a PR thing when 9/11 happens, and you see people come up in his ear, and one guy comes up and whispers like, hey, like one of the towers of the World Trade Center has just been hit with an airplane. And you can generally tell he has no idea what to do. He has no idea how he's supposed to respond to this. He's just like, okay. And then he keeps reading the book to the kids. He's not like, oh, this is like an emergency, because nobody's told him what to do. And this was really the vibe every American got from George W. Bush, that like, this guy has no clue what's going on. All right, so this is more about his administration and his team. But he's evil. It's evil. Everything this man did is so deeply evil. He killed millions of people. And really the architect of his military actions was Dick Cheney. Because this guy's coolest ding-dong, like, banana brain, Dick Cheney was the evil mastermind behind his foreign policy. The same Dick Cheney, yes, who endorsed Kamala Harris and whose daughter got on a stage with Kamala Harris with a big banner behind her that said country over party. So this is why millennials and older, when we saw Dick Cheney endorse Kamala Harris, we were like, you sealed the deal, babes. This is gone. Your mods can't just mute people for not having sources. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here, but if you're arguing and people are asking you why you're saying that and you don't have a source for it, I think that that's fair, because you're just kind of spamming, right? I think you can ask for information in a way that's like nice. If you're like, I've heard this, is this real? But if you're asserting something very over and over again and you have no sources to back up your claims, you're just kind of spamming, right? It's kind of troll behavior, right? So, let me make you guys a link to this. So again, CFR is not the best. They're more of like a center-right publication, but they will give you some good objective facts. Yeah, you can't just spread misinformation. No, that's not okay. That's really dangerous, actually. People, I think the mods should have power to mute people if they're spreading misinformation. So, yeah. You found the funding source of one of their articles and they didn't like that. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's it. I mean, you have to be engaging in good faith. And if you are so committed to a fact that you won't discuss the intricacies of the source or where it comes from or how that bias might be playing into it, like, you're not engaging in good faith in the chat, you know? So I think that that's fair. Yeah, that's the purpose of a mod, right? Is it misinformation if you're really sure Madeline is anti-Italian? Yeah. I don't think we want to entertain misinformation or things that, especially things that border on xenophobia. Misinformation, especially about America's political enemies, is extremely dangerous. Things like that. We got to be certain about that. Yeah. Okay. I trust Virgo. So sorry guys, if you don't like it, maybe it's not the stream for you, and that's totally fine. But I think it's important to have some pretty firm standards about the things we say. It's okay to be wrong about things if you're nice. That's the general rule. If you're nice and you don't really know anything about something, or you're like, I heard this, is this true? Or like, what about this? That's totally fine. Nobody's going to be mean to you about that. But if you're wrong and you're rude about it, I think it's fair for you to understand why that upsets people, right? So, wrong but nice, totally fine. Right and rude, totally fine. Wrong and rude, you just upset everybody, you know? So I think that makes sense. I think that's a fair thing. So I'll share with you guys the link to this. I have to make a tiny URL really fast for it. So 1 second, because I can't copy and paste in the chat. But again, this is not... I wouldn't say this is a great source. It's good for you to get a general idea to then go off of, if that makes sense. I don't stand by CFR, but I do use them as a jumping off point a lot in my research, and you'll see that sometimes I talk about them. FJTND9. I think this is it. Oh, yeah, okay. See, if Virgo and Ghost in the Towel and everybody is like they were being weirdly Islamophobic, like, come on, that's a given. That's obvious. Yeah. Being right and rude is allowed here. Torian Sapiens, I'm not a huge fan of it, TBH, but it's better than being rude and wrong, I guess. That's fair. I think that's fair. I'm sorry, Cercito. I was called ableist for mocking Aspen's speech disability, her speech impairment. She has a speech impediment, which I did not notice. I'm not fully convinced she does. And in fact, I was talking like that because I had a speech impediment that day because I had sliced my mouth open 86 times with potato chips, which you might laugh at, but I can assure you resulted in a very serious long-term injury that took many, many days for me to heal from, and I could not eat solid food. And then I cut my own finger off making a soup because all I could eat was soup. So who's ableist really? Aspen. That's my question. All right. Barbecue potato chips. It should not have happened. So, welcome. We are coming to terms with whether or not you're allowed to mute people who don't want to give sources. Virgo's allowed. You're allowed to mute people. Okay, so don't waste our time with that. Come on, these people. This poll, I'm voting. That's so funny. Yeah, I know, Cercino. I know. I know you know me. I know you. Hamburger voted first. Okay, so Axis of Evil. So this comedic clown of a man who has no clue what's going on, but somehow okayed policies with Dick Cheney that led to the murder of, I'm pretty sure, millions of people. Like, let's just fact check this. How many people died in the War on Terror? Here we go. An estimated 940,000 people were killed by direct post 9/11 wars on terror. So literally, this clown of a man killed 1 million people. All right. And I just want you to keep this in mind while we talk about him. Okay? So, during his 2002 State of the Union address, President George W. Bush describes Iran as part of an axis of evil. Now, the term axis of evil would get repeated on the news like every single day throughout the course of this man's presidency. We had to hear axis of evil so many times. I wonder if I can find a video of George W. Bush talking about axis of evil. I called him Georgie. That feels better for him. I really want to hammer home how dystopian this was, how fucking weird this guy was. He gave this whole speech. It's a 10-minute long speech. We don't have to watch that whole thing, but let's see what's going on if we can find one.
I love these. She complements my skin so well. Comfortable, confident, and resistant wear, as they are not stuck.
Our second goal is to prevent regimes that sponsor terror from threatening America or our friends and allies with weapons of mass destruction. Some of these regimes have been pretty quiet since September the 11th, but we know their true nature. North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens, leaving the bodies of mothers huddled over their dead children. This is a regime that agreed to international inspections, then kicked out the inspectors. This is a regime that has something to hide from the civilized world. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, that's enough of that guy. But this is really what we were seeing all the time. And a lot of the rhetoric that's used about North Korea, about Iran, about these places today persisting comes from this. First of all, I want to point out, North Korea, we now know, them developing nuclear technology is the only thing that has saved them from getting wiped off the face of the earth by the United States, right? And, the things he says about, they're building weapons but starving their people. We were helping to starve their people. We were starving their people with global blockade. So, that was what we were dealing with all throughout this era of George W. Bush. Also worth noting, the man could not say nuclear, that he couldn't. So it was always nuclear. Nuclear. So this is kind of the environment. So he says Iran is part of an axis of evil along with Iraq and North Korea. Exactly, Cercito, exactly. The nerve, so appalling. He says Iran aggressively pursues and exports terror. Again, Iran has not done this, right? Iraq invaded Iran and we helped. And now we have the audacity to turn on Iraq too and say they're actually part of the problem as well. Okay. And then he also said an unelected few repressed the Iranians' people's hopes for freedom, as though we had not literally overthrown their last democratically elected leader, Mossadegh, and not installed, but propped up their Shah, who was relatively powerless before then, into a harsh dictatorial presence there in Iran for years. It's just really appalling. Right. But if you don't know anything about the history, if you don't know about what we did to Mossadegh, right, you hear this and you're like, yeah, sure, Iran must be evil. And that is the level of political literacy most Americans have. Most Americans who think they're politically literate, they're like, yeah, I read the news. Yeah, Iran, bad, right? Iran leader not elected. Iran leader forces women to cover themselves. Iran building weapons, hates the United States. But you miss the whole history of how we got there and why, right? So, in response, the Iranian government stopped having meetings with U.S. diplomats, and stopped helping us basically fight al-Qaeda. So, on March 20th, 2003, the Iraq War begins. Now, what I want to explain is that after 9/11, George W. Bush was like, we're launching a war on terror. terror is not a concrete thing, just like the war on drugs is not a concrete thing. So, you're like, what's the war on terror? What's terror? Well, it turns out terror is anything that the United States government wants it to be. So what it actually was is a series of different smaller wars all lumped together under this heading. We are going to war in Afghanistan. We're going to war kind of against Iran. We're going to war in Iraq. So the Iraq War officially begins on March 20th, 2003. U.S. forces invade Iraq, aiming to end the threat posed by what Washington says is Saddam Hussein building weapons of mass destruction. And this is something we also heard on the news over and over again. Saddam Hussein's got weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein's got weapons of mass destruction. That was the justification given to Congress to approve us going to war. Yeah. So now remember, again, we had worked with Saddam Hussein in the past. He had been our ally in the past in trying to fight Iran for no reason. Iran had not invaded us or invaded Iraq. No, we did that. But now we've turned on him. We've demonized him in the media, and we're saying that he wants to build nukes to use against us, right? So Iran backs local Shiite militias in Iraq, some of which participate in attacks on U.S. forces. And Saddam's dictatorship is toppled, and he is executed in December. So pretty fast, Saddam Hussein's out of the picture. A 2019 U.S. Army study on the Iraq War concludes that, quote, an emboldened and expansionist Iran appears to be the only victor in the conflict. So, surprise, surprise, us meddling in Iraq did not help anybody in the region. Who could have guessed? So then the Iranian president at the time sends President George W. Bush an 18-page letter, the first letter from an Iranian leader to the United States since 1979. And he seeks to ease the U.S.-Iran nuclear tensions, but is like, come on, if you've got nukes, we're getting nukes. Like, this is silly, which I think is fair for other countries of the world, right? But it also is like, we also need uranium for energy production here too. Meanwhile, U.S. Congress approves the Iran Freedom Support Act in September to fund Iranian civil society and promote democracy there. I don't know what that means. This is probably just us agreeing to shove a bunch of money into, National Endowment for Democracy style programs. I don't know if we had National Endowment for Democracy. I think we did. We had it in the 80s, right? Let's see when it was created. I think it was the 80s. I don't know when 1983 is when it was created. I'm trying to remember when we really knew that it was the CIA, though. When it really came to be known. It might have been earlier than this in the 90s. Now, by 2007, tensions at the United Nations are mounting. During a speech at the opening session of the UN General Assembly, the president of Iran calls the dispute over the nuclear program closed and says his government will disregard Security Council resolutions calling on the country to halt uranium enrichment. He's like, we're not doing that. At a press conference afterwards, he calls the Israeli government an illegal Zionist regime. And a U.S. national intelligence estimate released in November finds that Iran ended its nuclear arms program in 2003, but continued to enrich uranium. Just like he said. He was like, okay, fine, but we still need it for energy. That's exactly what happened. Now, November 24th, 2013, we got Obama in, and he calls the newly elected Iranian president, Hassan Rouhani, in September to discuss Iran's nuclear program, the most direct contact, again, since 1979. 2 months later, Iran and the P5+1, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, plus Germany, sign an initial nuclear agreement providing Iran with some sanctions relief. Obama praises the deal for cutting off Iran's most likely paths to a bomb, while Rouhani hails it as a political victory for Iran. So again, these countries that are deemed enemies of the United States, we see developing nuclear weapons. It's a huge issue for us, the United States. Sure, in part because we're afraid of nuclear war, but more than that, because we don't want them to have equal leverage to us. Now, 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran and the P5+1 reach an agreement on Iran's nuclear program that's named the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And in return for sanctions relief, Iran agrees to undertake a series of steps, including dismantling and redesigning their nuclear reactors in Iraq, A-R-A-K, not like Iraq, allowing more intrusive verification mechanisms and limiting uranium enrichment for at least 15 years. The deal is meant to increase Iran's breakout time for developing enough material for nuclear weapons. So it wouldn't be like a few weeks, but it would take at least a year. And Republicans and Democrats both opposed the deal, saying that lifting sanctions would just bolster the Iranian government and allow it to destabilize the region, Israel, right? Because Iran is really emerging as one of the most global outspoken critics of Israel throughout this time as well. So then we get to Trump. We're in the first Trump kind of presidency here, and he announces that the USA is going to withdraw from JCPOA and mount a sanctions campaign to place maximum pressure on Iran. So he's accelerating or intensifying our conflict kind of with Iran here. Many arms control experts and European allies condemn the move because they're like, this is just going to increase tensions. Like, what are you doing? And Republican lawmakers, Israel and Saudi Arabia are all like, great idea. We love this. Iran responds by boosting uranium enrichment in defiance of the agreement's terms, and the withdrawal marks the beginning of rhetorical and military escalation with Iran under the Trump administration. 2019, the United States designates the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a branch of the Iranian army, as a foreign terrorist organization. It's the first time the U.S. designated part of another country's government as a foreign terrorist organization, so this is major. A week earlier, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tweets that he personally requested the move. So Israel asked the United States to do this because they were threatened by Iran in the region, because Iran is very anti-Zionist. And Iran always is just like, Israel is like a settler colonization program of Western domination. Like, it's the West coming to do to all of the Middle East what the United States did to us for years. And again, everybody is like, okay, well, we all hate Israel and Iran, so that's just going to make our army look more badass here and make us just hate you guys even more. Violet Blossom's genuine question about the UN in terms of its sources. So the UN is pretty unreliable, pretty untrustworthy on many things. Like a broken clock, they will sometimes be right twice a day. And it depends. And so the thing about these sources is you really have to look into their political motivation, right? You're not going to be able to really find unbiased sources. So I'm a Marxist, right? So I usually try to look up sources with a Marxist bias, right? Because I trust other Marxists. We have the same political goals and agendas. With UN, what you really have to think about is their relationship with every single country that they're talking about. So when the UN talks about Korea, right? You're like, well, if they say bad things about Korea, of course they're going to say bad things about Korea. They divided the Korean Peninsula in half. When you look at what the UN is saying about Palestine, for example, it's not like they have a motive to defend Palestine. There's no political motive to defend Palestine. It's probably not the most trustworthy source, but it's probably not as biased as them condemning Korea, North Korea would be, if that makes sense. So I think people sometimes get confused about sources. People get confused when I'll use sources that I'm like, well, this isn't a good source to condemn something, but it's an okay source if it's defending something that's against its own interests. And that really confuses people. But I think you have to be aware just of how the bias is directing the type of information you're seeing, right? So yeah, UN helped divide Korea, invade Korea, harm Korea. So if the UN is like, oh, Korea bad, you're like, well, you would say that, right? But it's a little different. If the UN is like, well, North Korea actually is okay in this situation, you're like, oh shit, okay, that's big of you to admit, UN, right? Do you see kind of the difference there? So I think that's important. So they definitely are not unbiased, right? But very few things are. Arguably nothing is. And the nature of the bias can sometimes be used to actually bolster your point, right? Like, if you're like, even the CIA has to admit this thing is true, that sometimes comes further than just like, I don't know, Michael Parenti saying the same thing. Because people are always like, well, Michael Parenti, he's a communist, so of course he's going to say that. Okay, but the CIA is anti-communist. So for them to say it, then you're like, oh shit, this must be true. Those kinds of things. Yeah, the USA drives the UN, exactly. On June 13th, 2 oil tankers were attacked near the Strait of Hormuz, about a month after 4 commercial ships were damaged in the same area. And the United States blames Iran for this, and Trump calls the country a nation of terror. Again, we have branded Iran as a bunch of terrorists based on racist rhetoric about Middle Eastern people and nothing else. They haven't ever really done anything to us. Like, what have they done to us this whole time, actually? Nothing. Not a single thing. Not a single thing. Hate us. Say they hate us. Very obviously, we understand why. I would hate somebody who tried to steal my country as well. So the United States announces the deployment of 1,000 additional troops to the Middle Eastern response, and the IRGC, that's the branch of their military, shoots down a U.S. surveillance drone 2 days later. The United States blames Iran for attacks on oil tankers in the region in the following months and tries to seize an Iranian vessel sailing near the British territory of Gibraltar. Attacks on Saudi oil fields. This were up to 2019. Drones attack oil facilities in the state-controlled Saudi Aramco in eastern Saudi Arabia, striking the country's second largest oil field and a critical crude oil stabilization center. The attack halts half of the country's oil output and causes an unprecedented jump in Brent crude prices. Trump approves the deployment of U.S. troops to bolster Saudi air and missile defenses at the kingdom's request. Again, Saudi Arabia, a kingdom, right? And this is also the way we talk about these leaders, right? A kingdom, not a dictatorship, things like that. And we backed the Shah in Iran. So we obviously don't have a problem with leaders of other countries we see as having absolute power. We're able to recognize that as a cultural difference unless they happen to be enemies of the USA. So just something extra I wanted to throw in there. Then Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels claim responsibility for the attack, citing Saudi intervention in Yemen's civil war. But the United States and Saudi Arabia still blame Iran. So Houthis are like, we did that because Saudi Arabia was all up in our shit over here in Yemen. And the United States and Saudi Arabia are like, I think it was Iran. Right? So there you go. Yeah. Protests at U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Iraqi demonstrators and Iran-backed militias attempt to seize the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad in retaliation for the airstrike that killed militia members. Oh no, my alarm's going off. Okay, we're almost done, guys. Sorry. Protesters chant "Death to America" and demand that the United States withdraw its troops from Iraq. Can you blame them at this juncture? Can you blame them, right? Everything the United States has done to Iran. And in response, President Trump tweets that Iran will pay a very big price for any lives lost or damage incurred at U.S. facilities. 2020 comes around. So the United States kills a commander of that section of the armed forces with a drone strike in Baghdad. And he was considered by some experts to be Iran's second most powerful person after Khamenei. And Iraqi militia leader Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes is also killed, along with 7 other Iranian and Iraqi nationals. Iran promises revenge and is like, we are not committing to any restrictions we ever made in a nuclear deal. Drink your water. Okay, I'm doing it. Okay. Oh. What are the balloons? Okay, I'm out of water. I'm out of water. No more. Do you guys see balloons pop up? Or is it just the MacBook thing? Do you guys see the balloons when they pop up on my screen? Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. It's like some fucking iMessage bullshit I need to turn off. Yay! I'm like, will it do it? I have no idea what causes it. Posture check. Okay. So, Iran at this point is just like, girl, fuck you. We're not doing any of your stupid little nuclear deals. So then Iran mistakenly shoots down a Ukrainian passenger plane as Iranian forces are on high alert for possible U.S. attacks. Not great. I want to remind everybody the United States did this to Iran already once before as well. So pretty bad. Nobody wants to do that. The United States also did this to Iran in the past. It later attacks multiple U.S. bases in Iraq. Why are they there? Get them out of there. If they get them out of there, maybe. I don't know. Seems like maybe they shouldn't have been in Iraq. Wounding dozens of U.S. and Iraqi personnel. Okay, so Iran. Also remember, the Iraq War was in 2003. We're still there. We just got military bases everywhere. Should I pull up the graph? Is it a prudent time to? This is something that always gets me. Just while we're at it, this is not the best quality, but U.S. military bases around the world, right? Like, also it's kind of backwards. The blue is land and the white is water, but you get it. Yeah, it's not normal. Other countries don't have that. Is audio out? No? Okay, I'll keep going. So, 2020, Iran launches its first military satellite, prompting U.S. concerns over Iran's long-range missile capabilities. Days later, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the same one who worked with Adrian Zenz to launch the Uyghur conspiracy theory, says the United States is still party to the JCPOA and will seek to snap back multilateral sanctions against Iran through a Security Council resolution. Opponents of the move, including Russia, argued that the United States abandoned the terms of the deal when the Trump administration reimposed sanctions on Iran. Like, the whole thing was like they were going to do all these things and then sanctions were going to be lifted. But when Trump was like, we're doing more sanctions, it's like, okay, well then fuck it. What incentive do we have to adhere to the deal? You just said you're not adhering to the deal. So Iranian boats then threatened U.S. Navy vessels in the Persian Gulf. Why are they there? Get them out of there. But the United States doesn't really do anything. So that brings us to May 2020. Venezuela. All of these things are related. And this is really the thing I want people to understand, right? So, amid a shortage in Venezuela, Iranian tankers arrived to deliver oil despite U.S. sanctions on both countries. Iran is just like, fuck you. Like, they need oil. We have oil. The United States is the devil. We're bringing them oil. And in June, the White House responds by sanctioning 5 Iranian ship captains involved in the delivery to try to discourage trade between Iran and Venezuela. So we're really, United States world police force. Failure to extend UN arms embargoes. Big Boy 313 says there's a new video angle of the Minneapolis shooting on the TMZ Instagram page. Do you guys want to look at that? I feel like I looked at so many of those, and it's really, I don't know what else we could see besides, like, that guy shot that lady in cold blood. Full disclosure, I don't have a lot of time left to be on live, so I kind of thought we'd just get through Iran, and I don't even know if we'll get to the Hitler stuff this time, but I'm going to save it up for Monday. Are you guys okay with that? Yeah. Okay, we'll get through this. Okay. So, 2020, they wanted to extend a UN arms embargo against Iran, and they weren't able to. At the UN Security Council, a U.S.-backed resolution to extend the arms embargo failed, highlighting a lack of international support for Washington's Iran policy. So everyone's pretty much like, oh, somebody gifted subs. Yay, thank you. Thank you, Chet Norris 90. So nice. Yeah, so the United States also fails in its attempt to reimpose international sanctions on Iran. So the rest of the world is just kind of like, you got to give up this Iran thing. The United States is getting fucking weird. Yeah. Yes, you're keen for the Hitler shot. Okay, everybody who wants to talk about the Hitler thing, please do. I did find some sources. I'll review what I've been looking at. And if you guys have other things you want to share, bring them to the table Monday too. So before I jump off of this, when we're done with this, I'll make sure to hit those really fast. I don't go live on the weekends. No, only Monday through Friday. 25. Wow, that's awesome. Did everybody grab them? Did everyone get them? Yay, so nice. Okay, so Trump's final sanctions purge, the end of 2020, basically. Trump ramps up his maximum pressure campaign against Iran with a flurry of new sanctions, targeting entities in the oil and financial sectors and leading charity, among others, as well as top officials. Yeah, they get doled out automatically around. I'm like, cool. Yay. So Washington cites as reasons for the new measures the Iranian government's alleged interference in the 2020 presidential campaign. That sounds like bullshit. It's suspected development of chemical weapons and human rights abuses committed during a crackdown on protesters in November 2019. So I really want to talk about this section here. Human rights abuses committed during a crackdown on protesters in November of 2019. So remember when we were talking about Venezuela? This is what we hear. Maduro is an evil man because he cracks down on protesters and he commits human rights abuses in Venezuela against protesters. Then we look at what the protesters are actually doing. They're lighting kindergartens on fire full of children. They're beheading random people passing by with razor wire. They are killing doctors and nurses attempting to administer healthcare. They're lighting grocery stores on fire as people are starving to death. So part of the U.S. plan is basically to destabilize a country so much and even instigate or outright pay and create these protest movements that are so egregious and obviously attempting to overthrow the government that when the government necessarily responds by cracking down in order to make sure its country is not overthrown by a foreign power, then we say, how could they crack down on protesters? You just self-waterboard on the weekends? I'll tell my partner, yeah. How could they crack down on these protesters? They're committing human rights abuses. And this is part of our formula. So this idea that Iran is committing human rights abuses against protesters in November 2019. It's like, well, we've been trying to aggressively destabilize their country since the freaking 1950s. Like, I'm sorry that a country has to be on higher alert against against insurgency efforts, basically, violent revolution attempts, because we, the United States, have literally been trying to overthrow their government. You know, so you can't have it both ways. You can't have political stability in a region and then go in and try to violently overthrow their government every few years. That doesn't work, right? You get one or the other. And so I think that's really important to point out. And then we use it as justification to prove how big and evil they are, right? There is an Iran episode of the podcast. Yeah, if you go back a little bit. So Iran boosts their uranium enrichment and the United States freaks out. We're like, oh my God, they're going to make nukes. They're going to make nukes. You know, so Iran's parliament approves a bill to boost their uranium enrichment up to 20%, which is beyond the limitations that were allowed in that agreement, but the United States stopped following that agreement anyway. It also vows to expel International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors if sanctions on the banking and oil sectors weren't lifted within 2 months. So they're basically like, look, you have no right to come and inspect our uranium production if you are not upholding your end of the deal. And your end of the deal is to lift the sanctions. So if you're still sanctioning us, we're not upholding our end of the deal. You're not coming to check out our uranium. Fuck off, right? The bill passed with approval from the Supreme Leader Khamenei, despite President Rouhani's opposition, because he'd been trying to negotiate with the United States a little bit more. Iran blames Israel for a killing, and hardliners insist the United States was also involved. Probably were, if I'm being honest. Khamenei signals that U.S.-Iran relations will still be fraught under Joe Biden. So that takes us to 2021. They're talking about trying to get this agreement back in place because they're really, really worried about Iran basically having nuclear technology. I think Iran probably needs nuclear technology, but okay. And then they have a new election in Iran. So Iran's presidential election is won by conservative cleric Ebrahim Raisi, a judiciary chief targeted by U.S. sanctions, actually, due to his involvement in a 1988 panel that sentenced thousands of dissidents to death, as well as his role in the repression of Iran's 2009 Green Movement protests. Negotiations to revive the agreement about their, basically, nuclear technologies stall for months during this transition. And Iran now, with him as president, right, basically is more hardlined. They're just like, we're not fucking dealing with the United States anymore. So, March 2022, basically the United States starts getting together some allies because they're like, oh no, Iran's becoming a problem. Again, Iran was adhering to all of the terms of the agreement, and the United States just started putting more sanctions on them, which was not part of the agreement. We broke the agreement. So this idea that Iran's gone rogue on the agreement with sanctions and nuclear production is totally made up. That is totally not real. So the United States, though, assembles military officers from Bahrain, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates for a meeting focused on addressing Iran's drone and missile capabilities. We're mad they're fighting back. And then Biden warns Iran, basically, because they're like, Iran reportedly is accumulating enough enriched uranium to fuel a nuclear bomb. It might take months or years to actually make it. But Biden basically commits to the United States using all elements of its national power to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Again, just to illustrate a point. The United States has 5,044 nuclear weapons. We don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. We have over 5,000 nuclear weapons. So, just really want to hammer this home. What weirdos we are. So then, guess what? 2022, oh my God, protests break out. This is something you guys might have seen on TikTok. I've talked about this before. A wave of women-led protests hit Iran. And a lot of these people were on TikTok at this time. And they are denouncing Khamenei, the supreme leader, and calling for an end to the Islamic Republic, right? And a lot of them are saying, we want to wear Western clothes. And we want to wear Western clothes. We're burning our hijabs. We want to wear Western clothes. And a lot of the older women in Iran are like girls on TikTok from Iran are now like, oh my God, these protests, like, yeah, mom, isn't it great? They want us to wear Western clothes. And their moms, a lot of them are like, you do not know what is happening. Like, no, like the reason we wear this is because the United States forced us not to, basically. So it creates this generational conflict. And a lot of people suspect that these movements are basically CIA astroturf kind of movements in the region. Also, who knows? Usually there is some sort of organic movement, and then the U.S. is like ramping it up. So, it could be any either way. Security forces try to suppress the demonstrations, restricting internet, because a lot of people are talking about this on TikTok. It did give to me, when I saw it on TikTok, I was like, oh, this is some CIA shit for sure, So that's how it felt to me. So security forces then restrict internet access, because it is a TikTok thing, and cell phone service, and they arrest 12,500 people, and they kill over 200 of them. But again, from their perspective, they're trying to stop the United States from overthrowing their government, right? I don't think it's great that they killed 200 people. I don't love that. I don't love 200 people dying. I also don't think it's great that the United States is trying to take over Iran every 5 years. So I understand why they have to have heightened security as a result of that. The Biden administration sanctions entities involved in the crackdown and exempts tech companies from other sanctions, and basically allows them to help Iranians access the internet again, because they're trying to use the internet to drive this, which that particular part of it is what read very CIA to me. If you've ever read the CIA was up to in Cuba with Zunzuneo, that social media app they built to try to get people to do protests just like this, you'll see why this feels very CIA coded. And it actually wasn't even the CIA explicitly doing it in Cuba. It was USAID. So it really feels like this. You remember your For You page was all Iranian protests? Yep. So, meanwhile, the White House signals that nuclear talks are indefinitely stalled due to the protests and Iran's apparent support of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So this is, again, what I mean by this. When people, like, when you read this source, it's like, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That is a very politically motivated simplification of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. And what's very, very funny, too, is you'll see a lot of people online. I see this all the time. People tell me that I'm, like, obsessed with Russia, that I love Russia. And I'll be like, oh, you don't even know my opinions about Russia. And they'll be like, no, I do. You love Russia invading Ukraine. And I'm like, you literally don't know. Because this framing of the conflict in Ukraine as Russia invading Ukraine, it really diminishes and kind of whitewashes what the United States has been doing to Ukraine since at least 2004. Right? Arguably longer. So I think it's really interesting. So you hear people say that sometimes, Madeline loves Russia. And I'm like, I'm whatever on Russia. I'm the same way about Russia and Iran, right? Not my ideal government, but you really understand their international frustration, foreign policy-wise, what the United States has done to them. And you understand that they provide a necessary counterbalance to the United States on the global stage. So very, very fascinating. And yeah, again, so this source, not great. Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're like, what inevitably happened after Russia begged for years for the United States not to park weapons in Kiev pointed at Moscow, and we ignored them. Really, so. Yeah, U.S. is doing an economic hit job on Ukraine. Exactly. We stole that country. We propped up a bunch of far-right fascists there who built statues to Nazis and made communism and socialism illegal. And then we basically used NATO to provoke a war with Russia because we wanted Ukraine, probably, as my guess, to lose the areas of Ukraine that were very sympathetic to Russia so that we would have full uncontested control of basically turning Ukraine into a capitalist hellscape to serve us for resource extraction. That's, Yeah. So, September 8th, 2023, prisoner swap deal emerges. Washington issues a sanctions waiver that frees up $6 billion in Iranian funds that were frozen in South Korea in return for the release of 5 Iranian-American dual citizens detained in Iran. Yeah, Russia wanted to join NATO, but was declined. I mean, when you read Ukraine becomes South Korea moment, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. When you read about the ways in which Russia tried for years to not have this escalate to war, you really start to realize that the Western framing of the situation is kind of evil. It's kind of messed up, So, frozen in South Korea, of course. Republican lawmakers criticized the deal, said to be mediated by governments including Iraq, Oman, Qatar, Switzerland, and the UK, as a ransom paid to a hostile government. U.S. officials say the funds offered limited benefit to Iran, which can only access the capital indirectly and use it to buy humanitarian goods. Days later, Biden also grants clemency to 5 Iranians jailed in the United States, though only 2 plan to return to Iran. Yeah, kind of evil is gentle. Yes, you're right. Being gentle. Sometimes I get used to TikTok speak. There's like a huge shift that happens for me on TikTok and Twitter. On Twitter, I'm just like, girl, fuck you. You're evil. And on TikTok, I have to be like, did you ever consider that maybe this isn't the situation you imagined? It's wild. So, Russia has been invading Ukraine several times over the last decade, though. No. What are you talking about when you say that? What are you thinking of? Because no. 2022 is when they declared war on Ukraine. They backed the separatist movement in the Donbass. But even then, the Donbass tried to join Russia, and Russia was like, we're not annexing you. Crimea wasn't Russian territory, right? Yeah, but Russia didn't show up there to take it. You know that, right? Crimea left Ukraine. They voted to secede from Ukraine and join Russia because the fascist government that we propped up in Ukraine was infiltrated by neo-Nazis who were trying to build a Ukrainian ethno-state, and they went to areas with a high ethnically Russian population like Crimea, and they were trying to expel it of ethnic Russians. A bunch of basically Nazis in the Ukrainian government were trying to basically kill people of ethnic Russian background in Crimea. So the people of Crimea were terrified, and they begged to be let into Russia for protection from those Nazis. And that was like a nearly universal vote in Crimea to become a part of Russia. Crimea at first they had no interest in joining Russia. Before the coup in 2014, Crimea had no interest in joining Russia. They were happy to be in Ukraine. And then the coup happened and the new government took power, and the new government was infiltrated just with a Nazi problem. And those Nazis wanted to build a Ukrainian ethno-state in the style of Stepan Bandera. And the new government started building statues to Stepan Bandera, the Nazi, all over Ukraine. And then they started basically going into areas of a high Russian ethnicity. And a lot of areas of Ukraine had a high Russian ethnicity, and doing really fucked up shit to them and like terrifying them. And that's why they were driven to the point where they desperately wanted to join Russia for protection and safety against the Nazis in Ukraine that had infiltrated the government. I mean, it's really gnarly what happened to those people. So that's why there wasn't even much that the international community could say about Crimea, because it was like universal. Like people were rejoicing in the streets when they passed the ruling that they would get to be part of Russia, because they knew it would protect them from the Nazis. There's one podcaster who lives in Crimea and talks about how they all consider themselves Russian. Yeah. Isn't that the justification for the 2022 intervention denazifying Ukraine? That is what Putin said. Look, here's the thing though. Ukraine does have a massive Nazi issue, like massive. Like they literally have been building statues to Nazis all over Ukraine. It's pretty bad. They were putting Nazis on stamps. I mean, it's pretty bad. They have a massive Nazi issue. I do not think that is the motivation for Russia for 2022 going to war with Ukraine. Very obviously, the actual motivation was NATO expansion. Very obviously, Russia for years was trying to negotiate about NATO expansion and kept saying, we're going to have to go to war if you don't negotiate with us on this. We feel very threatened. We feel very cornered. Please stop putting missiles surrounding us. You're surrounding us with missiles. Please, please, please. If you add a missile in Kiev, if you do this in Ukraine, like we're going to have no choice but to view it as imminent attack and respond defensively. We don't want to go to war with you. What if you let us into NATO? What if you create a different branch of NATO that removes these weapons from our perimeter or borders? Like they tried for years to negotiate. So I'm actually not sure why Putin thought strategically claiming it was to denazify Ukraine would be the best move. He's not wrong that there were massive issues with Nazis in Ukraine, but very obviously Russia's motivation was actually NATO. I feel like maybe he thought it might make him look weak to the Russian people to admit that they felt very, very threatened by NATO, which they did. They very obviously did in their private letters and correspondence to NATO and to the United States about this issue. So maybe that's why he didn't admit that was the real motive for the war. But the real motive for the war was definitely NATO expansion. And it's not like he was wrong that there was a massive issue with Nazis in Ukraine, but I don't think that was really the motive for Russia, you know? Thank you, Stretch. Oh, 8 minutos. Okay, you're right. 8 minutes. Oh, yeah, thank you for sharing the research document. Yeah. Totally. This tiniest boop, when you realize how much the Banderite ideology was rising, it makes total sense why they want to vote to leave in the referendum. Yes. And something that I don't think people get is that the Nazi contingency, the right sector there, they only had 2% of the popular vote when they were starting. But when some basically fighting had broken out, there was a group of the right sector, the Azov basically brigade, the right sector, far right neo-Nazi armed forces, who had basically gone into this one town that was getting bombed and tried really hard to defend it, and they failed. But the people there seeing this happen, I think it was Mariupol, I think it was in Mariupol that this happened, maybe. The people there seeing them do it basically made them all super sympathetic. So a massive shift happened. So originally only 2% of the population supported them. But then this battle happened, and it shifted public perception. And next thing you know, like famous news presenters, TV presenters were getting on air being like, you know what? Well, fuck it. I'm going to quote like Eichmann, and I'm going to quote Nazis, and maybe we are Nazis now. Like, it was wild, the shift that happened after that. It was pretty wild. Pretty alarming. So, yeah, Ukraine has not been sovereign since 2014. On Iran, yeah, I'll try to do that, Circita. For now, you can look at my resource document, or you can look at my sources in the Iran part of the podcast as a resource doc. Okay, so 2023, Hamas launches a surprise assault on Israel. Iran has been backing them. Iran has been backing Hamas. North Korea has been backing Hamas. All the homies are backing Hamas, right? Because Israel is evil. And Hamas also obviously captured some Israelis as hostages, which, again, to revisit that situation, it's like so heartbreaking. They literally captured Israelis, brought them into Gaza as hostages, thinking, you won't bomb us if your people are here, right? Little did they know, Israelis don't give a fuck. They'll go full nuclear mode on their own people if it helps them prove a point. Oh, the chat has a question. What is it? Isn't Ukraine a sovereign country, so has the right to join NATO? Kind of. So basically what had happened is that the United States had a previous agreements with Russia that they would not allow Ukraine to join NATO. So it was less about if Ukraine's allowed to pursue it and more about what Ukraine had told Russia in terms of negotiations they would permit and accept into NATO. So they basically said NATO would never expand 1 inch east of Germany to Russia, and then continue to expand. So it's less about Ukraine's rights, and it's more about negotiations between the United States and Russia. And Russia, for its part, was even like, fine, let Ukraine into NATO, but can you create another section of the NATO contracts that says that the countries that are bordering Russia at least do not hold NATO weapons? Or can you allow us into NATO so we don't feel as threatened by this? Like, Russia really tried to, like, say what you will about Russia. Again, not my ideal internal government. Sure, I'm a Marxist-Leninist. Neither is Iran. But when you see how much Russia really tried to negotiate over this, it really makes you frame what happened in 2022 a lot differently, if that makes sense. So, Hannibal Directive. Thank you, Bisco Witch. Hannibal Directive is a thing where they're in Israel where they're like, we'll kill our own citizens if it helps us. All right. So Hamas does this. United States and Qatar cooperate to block Iran from accessing $6 billion in humanitarian assistance released to it in September. U.S. and regional intelligence officials find no immediate evidence of Iran's involvement in Hamas's offensive, but experts say the country had provided weapons and training to Hamas in the months prior. So basically anybody who was allied with Palestine. They were like, you're a problem now too. Then obviously Iran becomes super involved. So Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen expand their campaign against Israel following this through much of 2024, aligning with Hamas. They defend Palestine, and they're like, Israel is a threat to all of us, so we're taking Israel out. So again, this is where you see the wording is a little passive here from this group. It's not like a leftist group, and that's the kind of stuff you have to be conscious of when reading it. The escalation leads to the first ever direct Iranian attacks on Israel, first in April after Israel targeted Iranian posts in Syria. So again, after Israel attacked Iran, then we saw the first attack of Iran on Israel defensively. And then with a missile and drone barrage in October that followed the assassination of the Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. In retaliation, Israel conducts its largest ever direct attack on Iran, targeting its air defenses and missile production facilities. The United States backs Israel, obviously, with military and intelligence support against Iran as well. So, 2025. The United States and Iran hold their first nuclear talks in 7 years. What ends up happening is Iran limits its nuclear programs in exchange for Washington lifting some sanctions. It kind of, we've seen this before though. It's not super interesting. And then the U.S. military strikes some major Iran nuclear sites. So that was on June 13th. It was a surprise attack. After weeks of fraught nuclear talks between Washington and Tehran, Iran, that failed to progress, Trump decides to carry out an overnight attack on June 21st, hitting 3 of Iran's atomic centers. Wild. All right, so that gets us to today. Here again. All right, so let's see. Iran in the news today. Now, what we're seeing is anti-government protests spreading in Iran as authorities cut communications. Anti-government protests broke out on Friday in Iran in the latest unrest to sweep the country. The unrest began nearly 2 weeks ago over crippling economic conditions, right, fueled by our sanctions, resulting in the deaths of at least 45 protesters, including 8 children, according to a Norway-based Iran human rights NGO. Authorities cut internet access and telephone lines. Donald Trump has threatened to attack them. And then Ayatollah Khamenei says the United States president should focus on the problems of his own countries. He is correct. It's hard not to cheer this guy on because the USA hatred hits so hard, and he is so correct in his assessments. The latest demonstrations are the biggest since the large-scale protests that were sparked by the death of a 22-year-old Mahsa Amini while in custody of the religious police in 2022. So that's what's going on in Iran today. Now, a couple things to note here, a couple things to talk about when we talk about this. First of all, economic conditions. Their economic conditions are being impacted by Western sanctions. The Western sanctions are literally the United States trying to get them not to develop the same nuclear technology that the United States has 5,000 of. Why? Because we don't want them to be able to stand on equal ground with us. We don't want them to have a chance at not having to succumb to our will and wishes. So the economic conditions in Iran directly caused by us just being evil control menaces, right, on the rest of the world. So that's worth noting. Also worth noting, these protests, we don't really know how organic they are because we have documented evidence going back decades that the United States fosters fake protest movements all around the globe, that the CIA has a track record of meddling in Iran, and they very obviously are political enemies. So we don't know if these are actual Iranians protesting. I'm sure many of them are. I can't say all of them are. I can't say that these are organic protests that just started from Iranians. The timing seems convenient. It seems like it could be something that the United States helped direct people to. We don't know. That's all speculation. So this is the kind of stuff where when you study the history of a place and you see it repeating itself, you're like, I have reasons to be suspicious. I don't know for certain. I'm not claiming anything's happening, but I have reasons to be suspicious that this is the organic uprising we're being told it is. If it is an organic uprising, it would make sense that people are upset about the sanctions, right? That would make sense. If it was an organic uprising in 2022, it makes sense that not every woman wants to wear a hijab, right? Or a head covering, a headscarf of some kind, right? That makes sense. But you also cannot discount the West's involvement in these things and driving these things. So we don't really have a good understanding of how much those people like or dislike their leader. And that's why ultimately at the end of the day, as Americans, or as Westerners, especially Americans though, it's our obligation to not condemn the governments of these countries, right? Because what we know, what we can verify is that they have been under direct attack for multiple years in multiple different ways by us, that a lot that's happening there socially and politically and economically is the result of us. So if I want to critique what's happening in Iran as an American, I'm going to start with my own backyard. I'm going to start with what the United States has been doing to Iran. If I want Iran to be more economically stable, I'm going to get mad that the United States has sanctioned them. If I want Iran to have more social equality, I'm going to get mad at the United States for having these backwards ideas of westernization forced on the women of Iran for so many years before. If I'm going to get mad at Iran for being a theocracy, which, whatever, every culture is different, I'm going to get mad at the United States government for forcing Western secularization on them before as well. So that's kind of it. The Queer Bitch says the hijab law is rarely enforced since 2024. These kinds of things too. It's like this type of progress is natural. Progress. It's cultural. It's not even progress. It's like that's like the Western bias kicking in, right? Like it's progress to not wear your culture's custom traditional clothes. Like it's not progress, right? That's just a different cultural custom, and different people have different relationships with their culture. Not everybody's going to want to do it. Many people will, whatever. But ultimately, to me, I'm like, that's not my place to have an opinion. I don't need to have an opinion about that. But what I need to do is recognize that whatever's happening there has a lot to do with what my country did to it. So that's kind of that's kind of how it goes. As a non-binary AFAB person in the US, I would like to be allowed to be topless, but the USA is too progressive. Yeah, right. We all have our different comfort levels. Like, and I remember living in San Francisco. There was a heat wave once that hit San Francisco. And if you don't know, San Francisco is usually pretty mild temperature, 50 to 60 degrees. And there's a heat wave where it was over 100 degrees, and everybody was losing it. Nobody was adapted for that type of weather. And a lot of the butch lesbians around San Francisco just walked around with their shirts off for like a week because it's legal to be topless there. And the first day it happened, some people were like, oh, whoa, okay. By the day 3, it was just normal. No, nobody even batted an eye. They're like, yeah, of course. Yeah, it seems normal. So, okay. All right, it's 11:03. I ran a little late today, guys. I'm so sorry. We are going to talk about the Hitler stuff. I'm going to show you what I found. I'm having a hard time finding good sources on this that I feel like I like. International Socialism. This is, you can tell by the title, this is some Trotsky stuff, right? They've got something on it. I mean, Trotsky did write a lot about this, so that could be. There's a Marxist.org, Leon Trotsky on the Rise of Hitler and the Destruction of the German Left. Trotsky himself was not, there's some good Trotsky stuff we can read still. There's a Britannica about the history of the Social Democratic Party. There's this Edgar Hardcastle piece, The Rise of Hitler, A Warning to the Workers. This was something we were looking up earlier about Iran. So I feel like we need more. You read that source last night. Would love to hear your views to help me assess how I engage with sources. What source did you read last night? I'm very, very curious. I feel like I don't have good sources on this. I feel like we need more. So I don't know. If you guys think, kind of work on a community Discord while we were here? Oh. Wait, Virgo, like setting one up for us? That would be so cool. Oh, yay. Oh my gosh. Yay. I'm so, Labutan Davy. I'm so glad you like the intro reading list. Yay. Wow. That's so cool, Virgo. So what we're trying to look up about Germany is basically, I guess, Democrats are trying to push this idea that it was, the communists not aligning with this, they're trying to claim with the liberals to defeat, Hitler, and that's how Hitler rose to power, is kind of a rhetorical thing to be like, you should align with us to fight fascism. But the reality of the situation is really different. And like, my understanding of the situation was always that not even the liberals, but like the Social Democrat, like the SDP, this group, the Social Democratic Party, that they actually were demanding a lot of capitulation to the Nazis and things like that. But it wasn't a topic I was super well versed on, so I wanted to look into more detail and have some good sources on. So that's what we're kind of looking at, into that dynamic. If anybody has any sources. Yes, I still have the doc reading list about the DPRK. I do. It is in my link tree. Yeah. Okay, so think on this. If you guys find anything, bring it to the table Monday. We'll have a group discussion on it. We're definitely going to do it Monday. Definitely. No matter what. All right, and I'm going to hop off the stream. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and have a lovely weekend.